The rain was falling hard, each drop beating the muddy streets like a drum. A human soldier named Daniel walked slowly, his boots heavy with dirt and water. He was tired, his uniform soaked, and his thoughts full of the battles he had already seen. The world had become strange after the long war with the alien races, but tonight was stranger still. On the side of the road, under a broken street lamp, he saw a figure sitting in the shadows. It was not another soldier, not a thief, not even a beggar he would expect to see. It was a girl, small and fragile, her skin pale with a faint glow, her features not human but alien. She was shaking from the cold, her thin clothes torn and dirty. Her hair, silver and tangled, stuck to her face from the rain. When Daniel's boots splashed near her, she quickly looked up with fear in her eyes. Her eyes were large and glowing faint blue, the kind of eyes that once made humans call her people enemies. But there was no threat in them now, only hunger and desperation. She struggled to stand, but her legs failed her, and she almost fell back into the mud. Her voice came out weak, almost like a whisper. "Please, I will clean your boots if you give me food." Daniel froze, shocked by her words. He had expected begging, maybe crying, but not this. This was something else, an alien girl offering humiliation just for a piece of bread. For a moment, he did not know what to say. The war had filled his mind with images of alien soldiers, proud and merciless. But this girl was the opposite, broken, starving, trembling in front of him. He stared at her boots, then at his own muddy ones. The girl's hands were shaking, still reaching out as if waiting for permission. Her fingers were so thin he could see the bones. Her lips were cracked, her breath heavy, and her knees pressed into the wet ground. It was clear she had done this before, maybe to others, maybe as the only way to survive. Daniel's chest grew tight. The sight of her pressing her forehead to the dirt made his heart twist. "Why would you do that?" he asked quietly, his voice almost lost in the sound of the rain. The girl lowered her head and answered, "Because humans, they only respect service, and I have nothing else to give." Her voice broke, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "I am hungry. I will clean. I will serve. Just please some food." Daniel's hand moved to the small bag on his side. Inside was a piece of bread, a ration he had saved for later. He pulled it out slowly, watching as the girl's glowing eyes followed it like a starving animal. But when he extended it toward her, she flinched. Her hand stayed still, as if she thought it was a cruel trick, as if he would pull it back and laugh. Daniel did not move his hand away. He only waited. Finally, with trembling fingers, she took the bread. She held it as if it was gold, as if it was more precious than her own life. For a moment she did not eat, her lips pressed tight. Her whole body shook with conflict. Then, slowly she took a small bite. The sound of her teeth breaking the crust was almost lost in the rain, and when the bread touched her tongue, tears rolled down her cheeks. Daniel watched in silence. The image burned into his memory. This alien girl, once called enemy, now crying over a simple piece of food. Every bite she took seemed like both relief and pain. Relief because hunger was leaving, pain because of how far she had fallen. She covered her mouth with one hand as she chewed, ashamed even of her own need. When she finished half the bread, she whispered, "Thank you. I will clean your boots now." She tried to move closer, but Daniel stepped back. He bent down, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't need to do that," he said firmly. The girl blinked in confusion, her lips parting as if she had not understood his words. Her kind had been taught humans were cruel, and her own life had proved it again and again. But this soldier's eyes showed something else, pity, not hatred. For the first time in her life, she was being given food without payment, and that truth was harder for her to accept than hunger itself. The rain kept falling, but in that moment, something else was happening. A story was beginning, one that would change both their lives. Daniel did not know why he had stopped, why he had cared, but deep inside, he felt it. This was not chance, this was fate. The girl looked at him with wide, glowing eyes, still afraid, still broken. And yet, within them, there was a spark, the first spark of trust. That night, under the storm, a human and an alien stood facing each other, one with nothing but hunger, the other with nothing but compassion. And though neither of them knew it yet, this was only the beginning. The fire inside Daniel's small cabin crackled gently, filling the room with a soft warmth. The alien girl sat near the door, her knees pulled to her chest, still shivering even though the fire was close. Her eyes, faintly glowing blue, moved nervously between the flames and the soldier. She clutched the half-piece of bread Daniel had given her, holding it as if it was the last treasure she would ever own. Daniel removed his wet coat, hung it on a nail by the wall, and set his boots aside. The girl's gaze lingered on the boots for a moment, as if her mind still believed she must clean them. Her hands twitched, but Daniel noticed and spoke softly. "You don't have to do that." She looked up at him, confusion filling her face. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Then why give me food?" Daniel leaned against the wooden table, his arms crossed, his expression serious but calm. "Because you needed it," he replied simply. The girl tilted her head slightly, as though the idea did not fit into her world. "Needed?" she repeated, tasting the word as if it were foreign. Her people had taught her that humans only traded, demanded, or took, never gave freely. She lowered her head again, pressing her forehead against her knees. "You don't understand. I have nothing, no home, no family, no name worth saying, nothing. The only thing I can offer is service, labor, humiliation if needed. Food has a cost, everything has a cost, and I must pay or die." Her voice trembled, and her glowing eyes burned with shame. Daniel studied her carefully, sensing the weight of every word she spoke. This was not just hunger talking. It was survival carved deep into her soul. It was clear she had begged before, worked for scraps, maybe even been punished for daring to ask. The world outside had already taught her that mercy was rare, almost impossible. Quietly, Daniel walked toward the small shelf in his cabin and pulled out a metal flask. He poured water into a wooden cup and placed it near her. Her eyes darted to the cup, then back to him, as if waiting for permission. "Drink," he said gently. "It's just water, nothing else." She hesitated, then slowly reached forward, her hands shaking as she lifted the cup. The water touched her lips, and she swallowed quickly, as though afraid it would vanish if she waited too long. For a moment, silence filled the cabin, broken only by the fire and the rain outside. Then Daniel asked the question that had been pressing on his mind. "What's your name?" The girl froze, staring into the cup. Finally, in a faint whisper, she said, "Leora." It was a beautiful name, yet she spoke it with no pride, only sadness, as if it belonged to someone who no longer existed. Daniel repeated it softly, "Leora," testing the sound. The girl glanced up, startled, as if no one had spoken her name with care in a very long time. She quickly looked away, hiding her face. Her voice cracked again. "Don't say it. It doesn't matter anymore. Names mean nothing when you're nothing." Daniel's chest tightened, his heart heavy with anger at the cruelty that had reduced her to this. He sat on the stool across from her and spoke firmly. "You are not nothing." Leora shook her head quickly, her silver hair falling over her face. "You don't know what I am. My people lost the war. Humans call us enemies. No one trusts us. No one helps us." She pressed her hands against her chest, as if trying to stop her own heart from breaking. "I am only alive because I can still beg, and even that will not last much longer." Daniel leaned forward, his voice calm but strong. "I fought in the war. I've seen enemies, and you're not one of them." Leora's eyes widened, searching his face for lies. But all she saw was honesty, and that made her tremble even more. She finished the bread slowly, each bite almost painful to watch. When it was gone, she licked the crumbs from her fingers, ashamed but unable to resist. Then she turned toward Daniel, her glowing eyes filled with both gratitude and fear. "Please, let me stay for tonight." I will leave tomorrow, I promise. Her voice broke. I don't want trouble for you. Daniel considered her words carefully. He knew the villagers would not accept this easily. An alien in a human's home was dangerous. But looking at Leora, fragile and broken, he also knew sending her back into the rain was worse. He nodded slowly. Stay, he said simply. The single word hit her like thunder. Her whole body stiffened. For a moment she did not breathe. Then she lowered her head again, whispering, "Thank you. I will not forget this." She curled up near the fire, her silver hair glowing faintly in the light. Her breathing slowed, exhaustion pulling her into sleep. Daniel sat quietly, watching her as the rain continued outside. Questions filled his mind. Who was she before the war? How had she survived this long? Why was she here, alone, in human territory? He did not have the answers yet, but one thing was certain. This girl was not just another refugee, not just another broken soul. Something about her presence felt different, heavier, important. And though he had no proof, Daniel felt deep inside that his life had just taken a turn he could never walk away from. The fire burned low, the storm raged outside, and in that small cabin, two strangers shared a fragile silence. Neither fully trusted the other, but fate had already tied their paths together. And in the darkness of that night, a dangerous story of survival, kindness, and something far stronger began to take root. The storm outside had not stopped, but inside the cabin, silence wrapped around the two strangers like a fragile blanket. Leora lay curled near the fire, her silver hair spread across her thin arms, breathing shallow but steady. She looked peaceful for the first time, yet Daniel could see the deep exhaustion carved into her face. It was the kind of tiredness that came from more than hunger, more than running. It was the tiredness of someone who had been fighting her whole life just to stay alive. Daniel sat at the table, sharpening his knife absent-mindedly, his eyes never leaving her. Every sound outside, the crash of thunder, the dripping of rain, the howl of wind, reminded him that this night was not ordinary. He had taken in an alien girl, a former enemy, and that choice was already shaping into something dangerous. But when he looked at her again, fragile and trembling even in sleep, he knew there was no regret. Near dawn, Leora stirred, her glowing eyes opening slowly. For a moment, she looked lost, confused, as though she had woken in the wrong world. Then the scent of smoke and the sight of Daniel brought her back to reality. She sat up quickly, pulling her arms around her knees, watching him with wary eyes. "You are still here," she whispered, almost surprised. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Where else would I be?" Leora looked away, her voice breaking. "Most leave after they take what they want, they leave." Her words carried heavy shadows, memories of encounters that had carved scars no one could see. Daniel said nothing, but the grip on his knife tightened. He hated what those words suggested, the kind of world that forced her to believe every hand was cruel. He set the knife aside and spoke gently. "I didn't bring you here to hurt you, Leora." Her eyes widened when he used her name again, soft and steady. The sound of it seemed to weaken her walls for a heartbeat. But then she shook her head, whispering, "Names are dangerous. Names make people remember you, and people forget me easier if I have no name." Daniel leaned forward on the table, his tone calm but firm. "You don't need to disappear anymore. Not here." Leora looked at him with disbelief, almost anger, as if his kindness was harder to face than cruelty. "Why?" she asked, her voice rising. "Why help me? I am alien, your enemy, a reminder of everything you lost in the war." She pressed a hand against her chest, her glowing eyes burning with tears. "Do you know what humans did to us? Do you know what they called us? Do you know what they made us?" The firelight flickered across her face, highlighting the raw pain in her words. Daniel stayed silent for a long moment, then answered slowly, "Yes, I know, I fought in that war. I saw what both sides did." He allowed a deep breath, his gaze heavy with memory. "I also know one thing. None of that matters right now. Not here, not between you and me." Leora froze, her lips parting as if she could not believe what she had heard. Her body trembled, caught between wanting to trust and needing to protect herself. She buried her face in her arms, whispering, "You will regret this. Everyone does. They see me, they pity me, then they send me away." Her voice cracked again, softer. "I always end up alone." Daniel stood and moved closer, kneeling near her by the fire. For a moment she flinched, expecting roughness, but instead he placed a folded blanket beside her. "Not tonight," he said firmly. "You don't have to be alone tonight." Leora stared at the blanket, her hands frozen above it. No one had given her warmth before without demanding something in return. She touched it slowly, as though afraid it would vanish like smoke. The fire crackled louder. The storm continued outside, but inside the cabin, something shifted. The air was no longer just heavy with suspicion. It carried a spark, small but real. Leora pulled the blanket around herself, her voice barely audible. "You are different, human, but difference can be dangerous." Her glowing eyes lifted to his, searching for something she did not yet understand. Daniel held her gaze and said softly, "Then let danger come, but I won't turn you away." The words struck her like lightning, making her chest tighten. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from something new, something fragile. And though she did not say it out loud, deep inside she felt it, for the first time in years. The morning light crept into the cabin, soft and pale after the storm. The fire had burned low, its last embers glowing faintly. Leora sat wrapped in the blanket, still near the fireplace, her glowing eyes half open. For the first time in many nights, she had slept without fear of being dragged away. But as soon as the village voices outside echoed faintly through the thin wooden walls, her body stiffened. Daniel noticed, his sharp eyes watching her every move. "You hear them too?" he asked, pouring water into a kettle over the dying flames. Leora nodded, her voice low. "They will not like that I am here. Your kind never does." Daniel leaned back against the table, crossing his arms. "Let them think what they want. This is my cabin, not theirs." His tone was steady, but beneath it, Leora could sense a heavy edge, a warning hidden in his calm. She hugged the blanket tighter, whispering, "You risk too much for me." Daniel shrugged, his expression unreadable. "I've risked more for less," he said simply. Then he poured hot water into 2 cups, sliding one across the table toward her. She hesitated before moving forward, her thin fingers clutching the warm cup. The steam rose gently, and for a moment she just stared at it, almost afraid to taste it. When she finally sipped, her lips parted slightly, and she closed her eyes. The warmth traveled through her body, chasing away the cold that had buried itself in her bones. It was such a simple thing, hot water, yet it felt like luxury to her. Her throat tightened, and without meaning to, she whispered, "Why are you kind to me?" Daniel's eyes softened, but his voice stayed calm. "Because you deserve it." Leora looked up sharply, her glowing eyes wide with disbelief. "No one has ever said that," she whispered, almost to herself. Her hand trembled as she set the cup down. "Kindness is never free. What do you want from me?" The question hung heavy in the cabin, the silence broken only by the crack of wood settling in the fire. Daniel stood slowly, walking toward the corner where his boots sat, still caked with dried mud. He picked them up, carried them to the small wash basin, and began to scrub them himself. Leora blinked, confusion filling her eyes. "You clean your own boots?" she asked quietly. Daniel glanced over his shoulder with the faintest smile. "Of course I do. Why would I make you do it?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her chest tightened with a strange mixture of relief and shame. She had offered humiliation for bread, yet here he was, showing her that she never needed to. It felt like her entire world had been twisted upside down. She whispered to herself, "I don't understand you, human." Daniel finished with the boots, set them aside, and turned back to her. "You don't need to understand, just trust," he said firmly. The word trust struck her like a blade, sharp and painful. Her people had taught her not to trust. Her past had proven that trust only led to betrayal. Her hands tightened around the blanket, and her voice trembled. Trust gets you hurt. Trust gets you broken. Daniel stepped closer, kneeling near her, his gaze steady. Or trust saves you. Leora, he said quietly. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the entire world outside vanished. The fear, the voices, the memories, all gone, replaced only by the warmth of the fire and the weight of his words. Leora wanted to pull away, wanted to hide behind the wall she had built, but something inside her cracked, something too fragile to hold together anymore. She pressed a hand to her face, tears slipping through her fingers. You don't know what I've done, what I've survived, she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel reached out, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. You don't need to tell me now, but you're safe here. Safe, the word echoed in her mind like a foreign melody. Safe was something she had never been, something she thought she would never feel again. Her body trembled, not from cold, but from the unfamiliar weight of hope. She looked at him through her tears, whispering, Why me? Out of all the people you could help, why me? Daniel's answer was simple, but it carried more power than any long speech. Because you asked, he said, his voice steady. Leora's lips parted in shock, her breath caught in her throat. It had been so long since asking had been enough, so long since anyone had listened, and yet here he was, proving that sometimes the simplest reason was the truest. The fire flared as another log collapsed into glowing ash. Outside, the village stirred, unaware of the fragile bond forming inside the cabin. Inside, two broken souls sat in silence, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as something new. Leora leaned closer to the fire, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. And for the first time, she whispered words she never thought she would say again. Thank you, Daniel. He nodded once, not needing more, because in her voice he heard it, the first spark of trust, a spark that, once lit, would burn brighter than either of them could yet imagine. The day passed slowly, shadows stretching across the cabin walls as the sun dipped lower in the sky. Leora sat by the window, her glowing eyes watching the village in the distance. Children played, their laughter faint, while adults carried baskets, tending to chores. Yet every sound from outside made her shoulders tense. She knew those voices, that laughter, that order, had no place for her. Her kind were not welcome, not trusted, not even pitied. They were reminders of war, and reminders were easier to hate than to forgive. Daniel moved quietly around the cabin, sharpening tools, fixing a loose chair leg. He acted as though her presence was nothing strange, nothing dangerous. But Leora felt the truth pressing against her chest like a stone. If the villagers learned she was here, they would come, and they would not bring mercy. Why do you look so afraid? Daniel finally asked, his voice calm but steady. Leora's hands gripped the edge of the blanket she still wore. Her voice trembled as she answered, Because kindness is a lie, it always hides something darker. Daniel stopped what he was doing, his gaze locking on her. Is that what you believe of me? He asked softly. Leora looked down, unable to meet his eyes. I don't know. I don't know how to believe anymore. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crack of the fire. Daniel moved to sit across from her, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. I'm not asking you to believe in the world, he said firmly. I'm asking you to believe in me. The words struck her like lightning, sharp and frightening. She wanted to run, wanted to curl back into the safety of mistrust. But part of her longed to believe, longed to accept even a single thread of hope. Memories clawed their way up in her chest. Memories of chains, of hunger, of humans shouting words she did not understand but always felt in their fists. Her glowing eyes filled with tears as she whispered, I was made to kneel, made to beg, made to think my life was worth nothing. Every time I trusted, I was broken. Every time I hoped, I was punished. If I trust you, and I am wrong, I won't survive it this time. Daniel leaned forward, his voice low but steady. Then don't trust the world. Don't trust promises. don't trust history. Trust only what you see in front of you. Trust what I give, nothing more. His hand reached across the table, resting open, palm up, waiting. No force, no demand, just an invitation. Leora stared at the hand, as though it was a blade. Her heart raced, her body shook, her breath quick and shallow. Part of her screamed to pull away, to hide, to cling to the walls that had kept her alive this long. But another part, the part that had wept over bread, the part that had whispered his name in secret, leaned forward. Slowly, trembling, she placed her hand into his. Her skin was cold, her fingers thin, but Daniel's grip was steady, warm, grounding. She gasped softly, as though even the touch of kindness hurt. Tears fell freely down her cheeks, and she could no longer hold them back. She broke, sobbing quietly, her whole body shaking. For the first time, her chains were not iron around her wrists. They were fear inside her heart, and his hand was breaking them. Daniel did not speak, did not move. He only let her cry. The sound was soft but heavy, the sound of years of silence finally breaking apart. When she could finally breathe again, she whispered, "Why are you doing this for me?" Daniel's reply was simple, but it cut deeper than anything she expected. "Because no one else did," he said. Leora's lips parted, her glowing eyes wide. She wanted to argue, to deny, but the truth was there, sharp and undeniable. No one had given her warmth, food, or safety without taking something first. Until now, the firelight painted her face, softening the harsh lines of exhaustion. For a moment, she looked less like a refugee, less like a broken survivor, and more like the girl she might have been if the war had never touched her. Daniel saw it too, the beauty hidden beneath scars, the strength beneath fear. But before he could speak again, a sound echoed from outside. Voices closer this time, men's voices rough and sharp. Leora stiffened instantly, her hand clutching his tighter without realizing. Daniel's jaw clenched, his other hand reaching for the rifle propped by the door. The voices grew louder, boots crunching in the wet ground. Leora's heart pounded, panic rising like fire in her chest. "They know," she whispered, terror flooding her voice. "They're coming for me." Daniel turned his head toward her, his expression calm, but his eyes burning with fire. "Then they'll have to go through me first," he said. Leora stared at him, her fear battling against something new, something stronger than fear, something she had never allowed herself to feel before. For the first time, she was not alone, and the chains of her past no longer felt unbreakable. The voices outside grew louder, heavy boots crunching the wet ground. Daniel moved to the window, pushing the curtain aside just enough to see. 3 men stood near the edge of the cabin yard, their coats soaked, their faces hard. One carried a lantern, its dim light swinging in the wind. Another carried a wooden club, while the third had a rifle slung across his shoulder. Leora shrank back into the corner, pulling the blanket tight around her body. Her glowing eyes widened with panic, her breath quick and shallow. She whispered, "They will drag me out, they always do." Daniel turned toward her, his voice firm but steady. "Not this time." He opened the door before they could knock, stepping into the rain. The 3 men looked up, surprised but not hesitant. "Evening, soldier," one said, his voice sharp. "Word is you've been keeping something inside this cabin, something not human." Daniel's jaw tightened, his hands resting calmly at his sides. "You hear a lot of things in the village," he said, "most of them lies." The man with the club stepped forward, pointing toward the cabin. "Don't play games with us. We saw her light last night. Those glowing eyes don't belong to your kind. You know what she is, an alien, an enemy, a parasite feeding off our scraps." The third man spat into the mud, adding, "Best to throw her out before she brings trouble to all of us." Inside the cabin, Leora's whole body shook. She could hear every word, and each one stab her like a blade. Parasite, enemy, less than nothing. The names were the same everywhere she went. Her chest tightened, and she pulled the blanket over her head, whispering to herself, It's happening again. It always happens again. But outside, Daniel's voice cut through the rain like steel. She's not a parasite, he said firmly. She's starving, she's cold, and she's done nothing to harm anyone. The man with the rifle narrowed his eyes. You pity her now, but pity has cost men their lives before. Do you want the war to repeat itself? Do you want another knife in your back? Daniel stepped closer, his presence towering even without raising his voice. The war is over, and I don't need your permission to decide who stays under my roof. The three men exchanged uneasy glances, but anger burned in their eyes. One hissed, "If the council hears of this, they'll come for both of you." Daniel didn't flinch. Let them come. The men muttered curses under their breath, then turned and walked away, their boots splashing in the mud. The lantern's glow faded as they disappeared back toward the village. Daniel stood in the rain a moment longer, his shoulders tense, his jaw set. Then he stepped back into the cabin, closing the door firmly behind him. Leora was still in the corner, curled tight, her glowing eyes peeking out from the blanket. Tears streaked her face, though she tried to hide them. "You should have given me up," she whispered, her voice hollow. "It would have been easier, safer." Daniel crouched beside her, his voice low but unshakable. "Easier isn't always right." She blinked, confusion and disbelief flickering across her face. "No one ever defends me. No one ever stands in front of me," she whispered. Her hands shook as she gripped the blanket tighter. "You don't even know me. Why would you fight for me?" Daniel's gaze softened, though his voice remained steady. "Because I see someone worth saving," he said. The words struck her harder than any insult ever had. Her chest tightened, her tears falling faster. Worth saving. It was a phrase she had never believed could belong to her. For the first time, she didn't hide her tears. She let them fall as she whispered, "I don't know how to live without fear. I don't know how to believe in this." Daniel reached out, gently lifting her chin so her glowing eyes met his. "Then let me believe for you, until you can," he said softly. The silence that followed was heavy but warm. Leora's heart raced, but not from terror this time. Something else was stirring inside her, something fragile but alive. She had begged for food, for survival, but what he had given her was different. It was not bread, not water, not shelter. It was dignity, it was protection, it was something she had thought forever lost. Days passed after that night. Leora helped around the cabin, sweeping floors, gathering wood, even trying to mend torn cloth with trembling fingers. But unlike before, she didn't work because she feared being thrown out. She worked because gratitude filled her chest, because she wanted to repay what she had been given. Daniel watched her slowly change, watched her shoulders lift a little higher, her eyes glow a little brighter. He saw glimpses of the girl beneath the scars, and with each passing day, his resolve deepened. But whispers in the village grew louder, shadows gathering. It was only a matter of time before trouble returned to his door. And though Leora did not yet know it, her bond with the human soldier was no longer about survival. It was something deeper, something dangerous, something that would soon be tested by fire. The whispers in the village grew into warnings, and warnings grew into threats. By the end of the week, Daniel knew the council would come. He sharpened his knife slower than usual, his eyes fixed on the door. Leora noticed his silence, her hands tightening on the blanket she had been folding. "They will come for me," she whispered, her glowing eyes full of fear. Daniel's voice was calm but firm. "Then they will find me standing in their way." That night, the knock finally came, hard and sharp against the wood. When Daniel opened the door, 4 men stood outside, their faces grim. Behind them, villagers gathered with lanterns, their whispers like a storm. The council leader stepped forward, his voice loud and cold. "We know she's here, soldier. Hand the alien over. She has no place among us, and if you resist, you will be punished too." Inside, Leora stood frozen, her heart pounding. Her breath came quick, shallow, and broken. Every step of the council echoed in her chest. Every word, dragging her back into the shadows. She thought she had escaped. She whispered to herself, "It's over. I will be taken again." But Daniel stepped forward, blocking the doorway with his broad frame. "She is under my roof," he said clearly. "She has harmed no one, and she will not leave with you." The crowd erupted in angry whispers, the leader's face twisting with rage. "You defend a parasite? A reminder of war? She is not one of us." Daniel's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "She is not one of you, but she is not your enemy either. She is starving, broken, and still more human than your hate." Gasps spread through the crowd, shock at his bold words. The leader raised his hand. "Step aside. Soldier, this is not your fight." But Daniel took one step forward, his voice cutting through the storm of whispers. "It is my fight because she chose my door, my fire, and my food. She asked for help, and I gave it. If you want her, you'll have to go through me first." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hiss of rain on lantern flames. The villagers shifted uneasily, anger warring with doubt. Leora's glowing eyes filled with tears, her chest tight. She had never seen anyone stand for her, never seen anyone risk themselves for her. She pressed a hand to her lips, whispering, Why would you fight for me?" Daniel turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers through the open door. "Because you're worth more than what they call you," he said simply. Leora's breath caught, the chains of fear around her heart cracking. She stepped forward, trembling but no longer hiding. Her voice shook, but she made it strong enough for the crowd to hear. "I only asked to clean his boots for food, but he gave me something greater. He gave me a reason to believe I was not nothing." The villagers muttered, some with anger, others with uncertainty. The leader growled, "Words won't change what you are." Leora lifted her chin, her glowing eyes shining brighter than ever. "Then let my life prove it," she said. "If survival makes me less, then kindness makes me more." For a long moment, no one moved, the rain falling steady. Then, slowly, one by one, the villagers lowered their eyes, their voices fading. The leader's scowl remained, but even he could not move past Daniel's stance. Finally, with a sharp gesture, he turned away. "This isn't over," he spat, and the crowd slowly dispersed into the night. When the last lantern glow faded into the dark, Daniel closed the door, locking it tight. He turned to find Leora still trembling, her tears falling freely. But this time, her tears were not only of fear. She stepped closer, her hands clutching his sleeve. "You could have given me up. You could have chosen safety. Why didn't you?" Daniel placed a steady hand against her cheek, his voice soft. "Because safety without you isn't worth it." Her glowing eyes widened, her breath catching. No words came, only tears, but these tears carried hope, not despair. She leaned her forehead against his chest, whispering, "I thought I only needed food to live, but what you gave me was more than life. You gave me love instead." Daniel's arms wrapped around her, steady and strong. The fire glowed softly behind them, warming the cabin. Outside, the world was still cruel, still waiting, still dangerous. But inside, in that fragile moment, an alien and a human had found something stronger than survival. They had found each other, and though neither knew what trials lay ahead, one truth was clear. This was no longer a story of hunger and despair. It was a story of trust, of defiance, and of love that refused to bow to fear.